Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Santa Monica KTC, Thursday night Sangha. We're so happy to have Lama Kathy joining us this evening. We're very grateful for that. So I will, you can make a donation to Lama Kathy if you wish to do so by logging onto our website, which is santamonicakTC.com. Or you can click the link in the newsletter that everyone probably received in their email this evening. And you can also look on our website if you are interested at all in becoming a member of Santa Monica KTC. We would be happy for anybody who's interested. If you have any questions, you can email us through the website. And with that, I'll give it over to you, Lama Kathy. Thank you so much. And we can all just put our microphones on mute.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to come and continue our book study of Mingyur Rinpoche's book, Joyful Wisdom. We've been working our way gradually through this book because it is a rich presentation of the Four Noble Truths. And as such, it's a good guide for us as we're trying to work our way through Buddhist practice. I think everyone who is watching this video and has been part of any Dharma center understands the importance of the basics and understanding the basic teachings of the Buddha, that suffering is part of life. That's the first noble truth. The second noble truth being the cause of suffering. The third noble truth being the solution to suffering. And the fourth noble truth being the path that leads to the end of suffering. And so already Mingyur Rinpoche has presented his teachings on the first, second, and now third of the Four Noble Truths. And now he's turning his attention to the fourth noble truth. And for those of you who are following along in the book, we are starting on page 99. And in the section on, let's see. I'm sorry, I said page 99, it's page 98. And it's in the chapter 4. That's where we're kind of at the end of the discussion of the third noble truth, and we're just starting the discussion of the fourth noble truth. And so we're on the section that he entitles Stones. And at the beginning of this section, he talks about the fact that the Buddha, in his 40 plus years of teaching, created many beautiful images, and he also gave many great examples and taught many techniques of how to work with the mind and how to lead ourselves through the sufferings of samsara and into Buddhahood. And so all of these teachings that were given by the Buddha were aimed at the audience he was speaking to at the time. And he gave lots and lots of different methodologies. And so one of the methodologies that was given was a daily inventory or review of one's thoughts, words, and actions during any given day. And it's really interesting because this coming weekend, I'm going to be teaching a little bit about the purification practices of Vajrasattva for Columbus KTC. So it's something that I've been studying this week and been reflecting upon this week. And the Buddha and Buddhist masters who followed him in Tibet, they developed a habit of taking this daily inventory of one's thoughts, words, and actions using stones in a bowl. That one would, and that's why this section is entitled Stones, because the tradition in Tibet was that you would have two bowls, one of which you would put black stones in, and the other you would put white stones in. But you could just as easily label the bowls negative actions and positive actions. So let's go with that description. You would have a bowl marked negative actions and a bowl marked positive actions. And then at the end of the day, you'd be somewhat fearless in taking inventory of your thoughts, words, and actions over the day. And that for every opportunity that you had, or every opportunity is the wrong word, every occasion that you caused harm to yourself or to someone else and participated in harmful speech or in harmful action or thought, you would put a stone in the negative side bowl. And then every positive action you took and thought and word and so forth, you would put a stone in the positive action bowl. And that at the end of the day, as you took this inventory, you would sort of have an idea of where you were. And then, of course, he gives many lovely examples of saying, oh, well, you know, if he said, for example, if you were encouraging to someone, well, you would put a stone in the bowl for that. If you practice love and compassion, you put a stone in the positive bowl for that. If you complimented someone, and then he started getting more internal and saying, well, if you think to yourself, I am using this mind of mine to recognize its capacity to make choices. Well, then he said, that's several stones in the positive bowl, and so on. And what he's getting at here is that by doing this practice, this type of fearless moral inventory, he said, this type of personal examination, he said, is an effective means of connecting with our essential nature, our essential Buddha nature, our nature of goodness and sanity. And I like to make sure that when I talk to people about purification practices and purifying karma and purifying negative thoughts, words, and actions, I talk about this. I say, you know, from the Buddhist point of view, we don't just enumerate the things we've done that are wrong in a day. That would be sort of depressing. And so what we do is we try to even that out by also talking about the positive things we've done and making the aspiration to do more of those. And say to ourselves, I'm going to do even more positive action tomorrow. And so in this way, we give ourselves credit for doing our best. And in this particular exercise, we connect with the part of us that is changing, that's in the process of continuous change. And so then Mingyur Rinpoche branches off from this discussion point and talks about the fact that external circumstances around us are always changing. People are changing, things are changing, situations are changing, our jobs, our relationships are in constant flux. And so he says that our goal in practice is to be able to discover our essential wisdom in the midst of all of these changes. And in this way, what we can do is we can, he said, develop an internal treatment plan. He actually uses the word treatment plan for our own mental afflictions by acknowledging them and engaging with them and making a commitment to work with our positive and negative habitual tendencies. He said we can develop what he calls the treatment plan of the fourth noble truth, the path that leads to the end of suffering. And so that takes us to chapter 5, where he talks about the process of developing this plan. He starts chapter 5 by talking about how everyone in the whole world wants happiness. I remember Trungpa Rinpoche once said, it's not like 80% of beings want happiness and 20% don't care. It's 100% of all beings want happiness. And yet we don't necessarily know what happiness is. Mingyur Rinpoche says, oh, we have rich descriptions of all of the different kinds of suffering, and for which he uses the original word of Buddhism, dukkha, dukkha, this suffering. He says there are so many. He said you couldn't even create an exhaustive list. But he said it's a lot more difficult to come up with what happiness is. What's your definition of happiness? And then he describes his work with audiences, how he likes to ask questions of his audience and get responses like, well, what's happiness to you? And he recalls one particular occasion when a group was saying things like, well, love or money or gold, or he said some person even said chilies, so what he's talking about here is that he said what he does is that he waits for people to become a little bit tired and to exhaust their idea of what happiness is. And then he says, I just like to sit in silence and let them sit with that silence. And he says, and you can almost see on their faces, he said, the growing realization that everything they named is outside of themselves and is not under their control. Even whether it's love, money, chilies, or whatever, these things are external and not under the control of the people themselves. And he said, in that moment, then he just lets the silence deepen, he says. In that moment, they begin to realize that this moment, right now, where they are naming their happiness, that this moment is all they ever really have. This moment now of awareness and experience is all we have. This is where happiness happens, in this moment right now. And he said this is what he likes to do with his audiences, to help lead them and guide them to this understanding that their experience in the moment right now, their awareness in this moment right now, is all they ever have. And all of their ideas of happiness arise from this present awareness that they have. And so he says that, then he goes on to talk about how our usual ideas of happiness come from our habits. And our habits are based on our perceptions. And he starts chapter 5 with a quote from William Blake, who says, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear as it is. And so, quoting Blake, then he goes on to talk about how some Buddhists say and believe that dualistic perception itself is a fault. But he says, if you study what the masters have said, he said that the masters say that the dividing of things we like, things we don't like, things that are good, things that we think are bad, all of this dividing, he said, is simply just another aspect of our awareness at work. And it's important to explore our habits and our perceptions and see how they color our experience. Then he talks a little bit about what he calls delusion and illusion. He speaks about the experiment of wearing green sunglasses and how it makes the whole world look green. And he said, this is like what we do with our habits, our everyday habits, our habitual tendencies to see some things as good, some things as bad, some things as helpful, some things as harmful. And he said, we mistake these momentary perceptions as absolute truths. The things that we think are good, we think really are good. And the things that we think are bad, we think really are bad. So we mistake appearances to be ultimate truths. And this is how we get into so much trouble, because everybody disagrees about good and bad, as we're seeing in the world every single day. And so there's this, he talks about this fundamental tension between what we think of habitually as being good and what really is. And he said this fosters what he says is a sense of unease. We have a sense that things just aren't quite right. And this, I remember reading a wonderful article by a Buddhist scholar who said this is the most fundamental definition of dukkha, or suffering, this sense that there is just something not quite right. Last evening, I had the privilege of sitting in on a discussion of Khenpo Ken Holmes's Nangi Shedra chapter on, it was on the qualities of Buddhahood. And we had a really lovely discussion about this sense of unease and the fact that all of us lack certainty about the true nature of things. Because one of the descriptions of a Buddha is a person or a being who has absolute certainty about the true nature of everything. Absolute certainty about the true nature of everything. And then Khenpo Ken comments and says something to the effect of, all the rest of us who are not enlightened are always somewhat uneasy and fearful that we're going to be proven wrong. In other words, that we're going to discover that we are wrong, or our beliefs are wrong, or that we just aren't certain about the true nature of things. And I thought about that, and it's absolutely true. No matter how strongly we believe in something, there's always this nagging fear that we're wrong. And so dukkha reaches into every aspect of our life, this uneasiness, and it makes us feel off balance. And so it's this that Mingyur Rinpoche starts talking about when he talks about this fourth noble truth, the truth of the path. He said, we have to be able to go up to and shake hands with our uneasiness. We have to identify and be present with all of our faults and qualities and investigate them thoroughly, and meet all of our habits and begin to question them. You've heard me talk before about, I believe it was Dzigar Kongtrul's book called It's Up to You. I get my Kongtruls mixed up, so I could be mistaken, but I do believe this is Dzigar Kongtrul's book. Yeah, okay, I thought so. Where he says it's up to you, where he talks about the practice of self-reflection in Buddhism. And Mingyur Rinpoche talks about this here as well. He talks about the Buddhist examination for self by giving a quotation. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. He talks about, let's see, about the three problems that we have. The problem is that we believe in permanence, we believe in singularity, and we believe in independence. In other words, we believe that everything is around us is permanent and therefore worth fighting about and worth grasping at. And this is, of course, disproven by the Buddha's teaching that everything is continuously changing and is in flux. Even our idea of who we think we are is continuously changing. But I'll get back to that in a minute. That's the first thing. We believe in permanence. We want that very badly. We want the good things to last forever. And we fear that the bad things also will last forever. So we have this grasping toward permanence. We also have this grasping towards singularity. I wasn't quite sure I understood Mingyur Rinpoche's use of this particular word, but when he explained it as being the feeling that we are a permanent entity, that there is a permanent me that is separate from every other me and every other being out there. Now I understand what he's trying to say, because this is a belief. We had a good discussion of this in our conversations about Chöling Rinpoche. I did a class recently with KTD Monastery on Chöling Rinpoche's wonderful book about karma, where he deconstructs the idea of self and entity and talks about how there is no entity in Buddhism, that we are a continuously changing iteration of consciousness, and that through time, we have continuously been just one iteration after another iteration after another iteration, and that nothing persists. And this, we had a really good discussion of this, but it does, again, fly in the face of our belief and our wish to be a singular being, a singular entity. So this grasping toward a singular entity, this grasping toward permanence, and then finally grasping toward independence, the idea that we have an independent existence. And that also flies in the face of what the Buddha taught about all things being interdependent. And so because of these three beliefs, we have an intense amount of suffering in our hearts and lives. And we need to deconstruct these things through practicing meditation, practicing positive action, practicing refraining from negative action, and bringing about an awareness, not just of our thoughts, words, and actions, but an awareness of the fabric of our experience that is our own natural awareness. And so he concludes the part that I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to stop with the discussion of independence. That I think it takes us to about page 114, if you'd like to look at this later. If he goes into he gives a quotation that I really like, and that is a quotation from Gampopa from the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, saying, the quotation is, "Does the self exist within a name?" Does the self exist within a name? And what he's getting at here is there an independent entity that exists of itself and by itself, or are things truly interdependent? And then Mingyur Rinpoche, in his fantastically inimitable style, says, what part of me is me? Is it my hair? Is it my skin? Is it my hand? Is it my foot? Where is myself? And then he talks about how Buddhist masters encourage us to look for a permanent self. And we can't find one any more than you can find the classic example given in Buddhist philosophy texts is a cart with wheels and a box and a handle. And the masters say, okay, which part of this is the cart? Where is the cartness? Is there cartness? And if so, where is it? Is it in the wheels? Is it in the box? Is it in the handle? And so forth and so on. And what they're getting at with this deconstruction is they're deconstructing our idea of an entity that is self-existing, that exists of itself and by itself, and not the way things are, which is always in flux, always changing, always moving, and always interdependently relating with others, other factors, other things. And he said that you can actually use this deconstruction to help yourself, to stop identifying with negative patterns and habits of thinking. He describes a person who said that they had been abused as a child, and that they were always taught to think, I'm a loser. I'm a loser. And he says, sometimes these people will say to me, I will never be able to find a good job or have a lasting relationship. And then Mingyur Rinpoche said, yet, just as impermanence has its advantages, inviting the possibility of changing jobs, for example, or the possibility of recovering from an illness, interdependence can also work in our favor. He said, one Canadian student of mine, acting on the advice of a friend, began attending a support group for adults who had been abused as children. Over several months of discussing her own experiences and listening to other people describe theirs, the shame and insecurity that had haunted this woman for much of her life began to waver and finally lift. Quote, for years, it was like listening to the same song over and over, she said. Now I can hear the whole album or the whole CD. This woman had not studied Buddhism at all during this period of recovery, but with the help of her new friends, she had uncovered an insight central to the Buddhist teachings. That is, that there is no self contained within the name. And the idea is that that we are always changing, and that we have the capacity to recover from all manner of difficulty. I have a friend who is a victim's advocate, and she recently described her experience going to one of the Ivy League schools that has a school of medicine, and talking about her own abusive childhood and how she survived it and how she is thriving now through recovery. And just to hear her talk about the fact that she doesn't have to think the way she used to think. She said it's such a blessing now to realize that she had the capacity to change and that she could actually do it. So that's a summary of the end of chapter 4, at the beginning of chapter 5. And then for our next discussion, we're going to talk about the teachings on emptiness that make all of this change and recovery possible. And so we'll be discussing that. I think I heard someone say that because the next Thursday in this series is Thanksgiving. So if you want to get together Thanksgiving evening, I'm up for it. But if you've got family obligations and so forth, we could just skip November and meet on December, I believe it was 21st, if I remember correctly. So we've got some time. If you have some things you'd like to discuss about any of these topics, interdependence and so on, happy to do that. And we can also just sit and meditate too. That's a good thing. Okay, meditation it is. I brought my gong. I thought this might happen. So we have a striker, we have a bell, and we have a cushion. Now, which one of these is the gong? All right. We'll sit quietly for just a few minutes and let our mind come to rest and settle in its awareness, in its natural awareness. Don't know if you can hear the bell. Sometimes Zoom has an override that does not allow you to hear the bell, but it's sounding. You can place your body in the posture of meditation and allowing your body to rest in the posture. Just start by feeling your body in the posture, feeling the ease of it, the balance of it, and form the motivation in your mind to practice shine, or calm abiding, for the next few minutes for the benefit of beings. Starting with one deep breath, breathing out, and then allowing the breath to come and go naturally. You can settle into whatever object you find useful, whether it's awareness or the breathing or a visual object or a sound object. So we'll sit now. Okay, that's a short practice of meditation. And really appreciate the opportunity to sit with you this evening and to review the book. And hopefully this will inform your practice this week. And I look forward to seeing you, if not next month, in December, to further discuss the fourth noble truth. So
Great.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank
And we'll be
Yeah.
in touch about other programs, you know.
Thank you.
Thank